protesters made their way through Century City Mall on Sunday. They first went to a nearby Ralph's supermarket where there were confrontations with shoppers captured on cell phone video.
Nandirito na naman po tayo sa isang nagbabaga at lumalagablab na balitaan. Balitang walang inuurungan, ngunit may ipaglalaban para sa bayan. Ito ang 26 Patrol! Kami ang inyong tagapagbalita, Maya Medina
at Angel Bertucci.
Paksa natin ngayong umaga.
Ang pag-uusapan natin ngayon ay ang anti-maskers and anti-vax movements. Alamin natin ngayon yung sides ng mga anti-movements na ito. To enlighten us about our topic for today, here is President Joshua James De Pedro.
Salamat sabi ko dito para sa mga di naniniwala sa COVID. Daling ko kayo sa COVID ward, huwag kayo mag-face mask at face shield, hindi rin kayo gagamutin ng gobyerno. Kasi itong ginagawa nyong skepticism nyo at hyper-liberalism nyo, nadami nang namamatay sa mga fake news na pinapakalat nyo. Kasi ang mangyayari niyan, gagastos na naman yung gobyerno. Babawasan na naman yung pera ng ekonomiya kapag nawala ng immunity yung mga naunang bakunahan. Kaya ang sinasabi ko sa inyo, magpa-vaccine na kayo. Para mas ma-enjoy nyo yung civil liberties nyo, hindi namin ito kina-curtail. We are the state and we are here to protect you.
To enlighten us about their movements aggregates, we will be with the representative of the Anti-Maskers League, Ms. Bianca Ballesta.
And to hear the other side of the movement, here is the anti-vax movement. We have Ms. Dalian Kamantini.
So yes, actually, the government is just exaggerating this COVID. It's just a mere flu and colds. The government is taking advantage of the situation by requiring everyone to wear masks. It's really a hassle and it's even unconstitutional. Come on, people, it's just one of their political tactics to suppress our freedoms. That's their way of controlling and militarizing us. Hindi ba nare-realize ng mga tao na the government is doing that para matanggalan tayo ng freedom? They want us to become robots by complying to these protocols. Don't you see that? Our freedoms and rights are being eroded. Wearing of these face masks is really making us uncool and weak. This mask, hindi tayo sure kung safe ba siya. Saan ba yan gawa? Baka nga dyan pa nanggagaling yung bacteria and viruses. So, don't act as if you're robots na comply na lang kayo ng comply. Come on, people. Protect your freedoms, your rights. Open your eyes, di ba?
Tingnan natin ang panig ng anti-vax movement. So, Miss Anne?
So, kami naman, I agree with Ms. Ballesta that they are militarizing the people through their protocols. Just like the whole vaccine situation, kahit labag sa loob ng tao ang magpa-vaccine, the government still required the people to be vaccinated. Ang argument pa nga nila dito dahil libre, walang rason kung bakit ayaw magpa-vaccine ng mga tao. For us anti-vaxxers, we see this certain strategy of the government to eradicate the virus as a violation of our rights. It's 2021, and their group strongly believes that we got to choose what we put or what we do to our body, especially if it concerns our health. Ngayon pa nga lang na ang dami nang nababalita na nagkakaroon pa din ng COVID kahit na vaccinated sila. Ang daming lumalabas din na bagong variant, pero ang vaccine nauna na.
Director General of the World Health Organization, Mr. Renil Suyan.
COVID-19 is real and is a threat to all of humanity if not dealt with immediately. The WHO urged the people to get vaccinated. It is not vaccines that will stop this pandemic, it is vaccination. Now, with regard to the vaccine skepticism growing up, the vaccines that all of us are using have gone through many phases and clinical trials before being allowed for public use. Our vaccine providers and healthcare workers are dedicated to their work and are doing what is needed to stop the further transmission of COVID-19. Through vaccination and herd immunity, it is like we are forming a barrier of people who are protected, who break the chain of transmission. Through concerted efforts of the global community and following health protocols, and especially being vaccinated, we can defeat this invisible enemy that continues to wreak havoc worldwide.
Further give us an analysis regarding the issue and the views of the movements. Here with us live on Zoom, the political scientist from San Beda University, Manila, Mr. Neil Ramos.
So it seems to me that both movements shows the pervasive occurrence brought by COVID-19. The anti-vax movement clearly manifested that people should have a choice in not getting vaccinated. In contrast naman dito sa anti-masker movement which clearly shows that they are sick and tired of government regulations. Both movements suffers in the lack of data that not wearing masks and not getting vaccinated will stop the spread of the virus. As it was stated earlier by the World Health Organization, COVID-19 is a real issue. Every country should achieve herd immunity in order to curb the spread of the virus and reopen its economy. Thus, both movements operate in a different principles, ideologies, goals, and motivations that can influence government policies. Let me end my analysis with this. They can criticize the government all they want, but at the same time, we can criticize back.
Yes, at mga kababayan, dyan na nga po nagtatapos ang mainit na talakayan ngayong umaga ukol sa anti-mask and anti-vax movements na sana ay nakatulong para malaman nyo kung ano nga ba ang meron sa contention and protest cycles. Muli, kami po ang inyong lingkod, Maya Medina
At Angel Bertuccio.
Dito lamang yan sa nagbabaga at lumalagablab na balitaan, balitang walang inuurungan, ngunit may ipaglalaban para sa bayan. Ito ang 26 Patrol!
Because of the prevalent pandemic of today, we're now going to talk about the anti-mask movement or the anti-maskers league. So this anti-mask movement started during the Spanish flu of 1919. It was led by Mrs. E.C. Harrington, which is a suffragist and a lawyer. According to her, that the wearing of mask is really ineffective, inconvenient, and a violation of civil liberties or civil rights. And she points out that it is just one of the government's political tactics to control, suppress, and militarize the people. In that, she wrote in San Francisco Chronicles calling out the people not to follow the protocol. And because of that, on January 25, 1919, the very first meeting of the movement happened. So here, we will discuss the timeline of the movement. So, the movement rose during the second wave of the Spanish flu of 1919 because the authorities mandated the wearing of masks. And on January 25, 1919, the very first meeting of the movement happened wherein there were around 2,000 to 5,000 attendees. Those people got imprisoned and paid a fine for not following the protocol. In that, on February 1, 1919, the movement passed a petition to the Board of Supervisors demanding to invoke the mask ordinance. And after 4 days, San Francisco lifted the mask ordinance because the Spanish flu is almost done. That is why this movement is called a short-lived one. And today, as COVID-19 spreads, the anti-mask movement rise again. So starting from April 2020, the movement heightened because of the mandatory wearing of masks. It is then said that the people who were involved in this movement were the ones who believe in those conspiracy theories about the COVID. And it is highly politicized today because the conservative ones and the Republicans were not wearing masks. And in US, there were movement protests and rallies wherein they go to public places like malls, groceries, and the such, wherein they sometimes mock the people who wear masks. And they were also active on social medias using different hashtags to trend. And today, the movement evolved. It does not just contest the wearing of masks, but also the different health protocols, just like the rise of the anti-vaccines. So in that, let me introduce Mr. De Pedro to discuss about the anti-vaccine movement.
The history of anti-vaccine movement. It first started with the smallpox disease in 18th century. There were three contexts that they did not want the vaccine to be injected in themselves, because the smallpox vaccine was mutated or borrowed from a cow. The religious institution said that the vaccines are the work of the devil, and while other sectors, such as institutions, declared that these vaccines are unsanitary. Seen in today the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, the anti-vaxxers today can be simply seen in two words: the skeptics and the hyper-liberals. The movement builds up on fake news. There was an instance that a nurse took a vaccine and then she passed out for a few moments. Then the anti-vaccine movement used it for the grounds to build up different sorts of fake news to scare the people and to increase the skepticism within the public sphere in order for them to refrain or to fear by taking vaccines. Stated by Borky, the movement grew fastly from having only 7.8 million followers, but by the time the pandemic struck or it happened, their members skyrocketed up to 37.8 million. Using the material of Sidney Taro, the modern forms of contention are aimed at demonstrating a claim, either to objects of the claim, to power holders, or to significant third parties. This makes contentious politics a form of representative politics. However, it also has its trade-off or danger. It instills in a symbolic and cultural elements, even in the most violent forms such as terrorism and guerrilla warfare. Even though that there is extremities in the given or definition by Taro, it still shows an identity of a group or a movement. The repertoire of contention offers movements three types: a collective action disruption, violence, and contained behavior. As we can see, the anti-vaccine movement has some behavior that are like to one another, or a collective behavior, shall I say. They always challenges the vaccines from, it dates back again from the smallpox and solidarity of the group of being skeptics. Some of them claim that COVID vaccines have microchips that comes from Bill Gates and COVID-19 is a hoax only. And there is also another claim of this movement that the coronavirus can be transmitted to 5G network. Now, it's up to you to decide if their claims are true or not as political science students to fact check it. That's all. The next reporter is Mr. Ramon.
Okay. So let us discuss the expansion of the anti-mask movement. We can see in this COVID-19 pandemic that people shows disdain towards wearing face masks. And these people are highly vocal, where their sentiments are based on a psychological warfare or reactance. Just like in the Spanish flu in 1919, this current pandemic shows that the movement uses the same sentiments as it was back then, where they have said that masks are ineffective, they are a breach of our civil liberties, and the likes. So in a study conducted by Taylor and Asmundson, it is found that the majority of respondents, specifically 84%, reported that they wore face masks. Now this signifies that even if this movement shows that disdain towards face masks, many of its respondents or people in the area still following health protocols. Now, the movement is strong, but their message is not strong enough to inculcate the people to not wear face masks, because this pandemic shows that it has killed a lot of people and it is effective. So that's the data that was presented by Taylor and Asmundson. The next reporter will be Mia, explaining the expansion of the anti-vax movement.
Okay, so good afternoon. So now we discuss how the anti-vax movements expanded and made an impact. So their existence can be viewed as the advantage and disadvantage. So advantage because they used social media, and social media has become a powerful tool in mobilizing movements, spreading information, and achieving goals. Just like the free AJ stuff on Twitter that we have discussed, we have seen how social media became powerful. So on social media, these movements use the social networks approach. So they create patterns of information flow by the social mediators, which are them, so that they can increase their number and expand and reach out to other people. So in the case of the anti-vax movements, the most used platform for them is Twitter. And they're spreading health information, but the content is not evidence or fact-based. They are based on personal stories. So we can see that they're saying that there's no incidence of diseases, so there's no need for vaccination. So there is a concept of disinformation. And when we say disinformation, it has something to do with the propaganda. And anti-vax movement have this propaganda. So basically, their advantage is social media. But it can also be about disadvantage. Why? Because in social media, there can also be legitimate information. If there are false information, there are also the existence of fact-based information. And we can see or visit that in the official accounts of the health organization or experts. We can see the World Health Organization on Facebook, on Twitter, where we can verify the information that we are encountering online. And even we should put a strong emphasis on parents' education about how to find and check information in health institutions. So it means that parents have roles in combating this disinformation. And also we must have educational campaigns which can also rise on social media. So legitimate information must be understandable by the public. So when these rise on social media, it can hinder this anti-vax movements. So this is how the anti-vax movements expanded and made an impact. So the next to report is Angel.
So the movement criticized the government as they fight for these several arguments. Like the first one, wherein the anti-mask movement argues that the government is violating their civil rights. Like what happened in Vancouver, Washington, wherein the members of the movement, including its supporters, which are the Patriot Prayer and People's Right Washington, has taken part in the rally. They argued that the state mask mandate is a violation of freedom. Protestants was also supported with people that believes conspiracy theories wherein they believe that threat of COVID-19 is exaggerated only by the government in order to control the nation as a whole. Others also states that they are exempt from the rules because, as stated in the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, that no states are allowed to make laws and take our freedoms and liberties away. So other than that, it violates the anti-maskers' civil liberties. They also think that wearing a mask is annoying as it makes breathing difficult. They are also not convinced that they work. And they simply believe that masks are inefficient in preventing the COVID-19 virus. Other than that is they also argues that in some places, masks are not just that common, especially in rural areas. Anti-maskers also believes that this is also some kind of money-making plan, including other drugs or vaccine that is developed by businesses or big pharma in order to make money. They even included Bill Gates as a part of it, wherein he was also named as a nefarious figure. Next is psychological reactants. The anti-maskers and people that support the movements as it is a threat to one's sense of control, autonomy, and freedom of choice. In the US and Canada, they surveyed 2,078 adults in a study and found out that 80% of people wear masks because of COVID-19. The 16% who did not wear masks scored higher on most measures of negative attitudes towards masks. These people that objects to wear masks is said to be that vocal minority and engaging in protest rallies. These central nodes serve as links connecting the network of anti-mask attitudes to negative attitudes toward the SARS-CoV-2 vaccination. With the skepticism about masks, on the other hand, Republicans that opposes masks argues that they are forced to wear masks for a virus that killed less than 10,000 people in their place. They claim that they are more likely to be murdered in Kansas City than catch a COVID there. Also, other claims that they are being forced to wear a useless mask when going to work.
And when they have bad allergies, they can't breathe well, but still they have to deal with it. Republicans think that this outbreak is not a big deal since we have more people dying from the flu, heart disease, overdoses, car accidents, and suicides. And they also believe that it is only a government-controlled thing to see how far they can push us. So may I call on Ms. Kamantigue to discuss the anti-vax movement criticism to the government?
Just like the anti-maskers, the main argument of the anti-vaxxers movement is that people have the right to choose whatever treatment or medical procedures they want to use in their bodies. It is their choice because it's simply their body. They went on to say that people can take care of their health by not blindly obeying. Rather than taking vaccines for which they have no concrete proof of efficacy, they promote a healthier diet, better nutrition, and sanitation because natural immunity, as per anti-vaxxers, outperforms vaccine-acquired immunity. Also, these movements are quick to dismiss or minimize the disease's threat, stating that it is nothing more than a cold or a flu that the government is exaggerating. They tend to put that vaccines are a conspiracy for the reasons that, as the movement explained, the government imposes fear onto people to comply with the protocols, and that these tactics are used to obtain money, to use to militarize the society, and to manipulate people for their own interests. Then, one of the biggest and in some ways the most convincing assertion made by anti-vaxxers is that they consistently overestimate the risk of vaccines, which a lot of these are present in social media, and a lot of people are believing with this false news. So they claim that vaccination causes a wide range of diseases, including smallpox, syphilis, typhoid, tuberculosis, cholera, and blood poisoning, or that when you get vaccinated, you may experience various illness that can lead to death. In present day, these groups gain a lot of influence and supporters from this argument, particularly because COVID is a new virus that has emerged, and they repeatedly question its effectiveness, question the effectiveness of the vaccines, especially now that new variants arises and that a lot of people are dying even though they are vaccinated, just like in India where doctors died due to COVID even though they are vaccinated. Skeptics also arise on why it is already available in the markets when the trial phases are still ongoing. So the anti-vaccine movement firmly believes that people should not be used as experimental rats or guinea pigs in this global experiment. The last one is that these movements, aside from its expanding number of supporters, they gain legitimacy by appealing to authority. By this, it means that some famous personalities like Jim Carrey and Donald Trump, who have shown their loud support on social media for this movement. So with this, since they're famous, they have a wide range of supporters and a big platform, they get the movement itself get additional supporters, and with this they rooted the firm basis that if this prominent individual supports them, then they are on the correct track. So the next topic will be reported by Mr. Suya.
For the criticisms to the anti-mask movement, firstly, according to De La Porta, in general, social movement studies notice that protests in the beginning tend to focus on some specific issues, then growing in generality as different groups mobilize. This specific to generality can be seen in the anti-mask movement. According to MUMA, there was a message from the organizers of the Feb 20 rally in Alberta, Canada, that was saying that the invitation was open to all people and all groups, but some experts stated that it was not simply not the case. Galloway, a research and intervention specialist with Organization for the Prevention of Violence, argued that this was not a call to all Albertans. This was a call to certain types of Albertans that they want to come out, Albertans who could support their stand and serve as manpower. Another for Chaudhry, the director of the Office of the Human Rights, Diversity and Equity at McEwan University, posted that the difference between what the protest claimed to be versus what it was can be disorienting. He also stated that they showed up to protest not wearing a mask. Then all of a sudden, they are now talking about anti-government upheavals, takeovers. Some protesters who advertised the rally was even calling it as a Jericho Torch March, likening it to a biblical battle in which Israelites conquered the city by causing the walls surrounding it to crumble. Galloway stated that that is not how someone just talking about freedom from mask wearing talks. According to Hexam, a professor of religious studies at the University of Calgary, he added that to tie it to a religious justification is unreasonable. He argued that they have no real basis for doing that, and there's nothing essentially religious or Christian in what they're putting forward. Galloway even stated that the people lined up to speak include right-wing political and religious figures with many agendas reaching far beyond COVID-19 measures. And in the US before, scientists at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security ran a simulation on fictional coronavirus last year. Dr. Toner from Johns Hopkins was the one who led the simulation, and he stated that he did not anticipate that public health measures would be deemed political. So in his work, The Psychology of Pandemics, he saw a lot of parallels in what is happening now and what happened before. What the anti-maskers did in the past, they are still doing today. And he stated that all these things mentioned have been seen before. So these are the parallels in the screen. Lastly, for Taylor, again, there's a group which he calls as a kind of covered disregard syndrome. And this is when someone tries to encroach upon their freedoms. They react in almost a very strong pushback, and the people who have this reactant tend to be anti-maskers, they're anti-vax, and they want to open up the economy. And they don't want to engage in social distancing, and they also tend to be politically conservative as well. Now, to discuss the criticisms for the anti-vax, here is Mr. Maya Medina.
So, good afternoon. So we now go to the criticisms of the anti-vax movement. So the first is the post hoc ergo propter hoc. So since the anti-vaccine movements are using anecdotal evidence to spread information about their beliefs, we can say that they are using this fallacy. So that because of this, there came this. So in the case of the movement, they're linking autism with the MMR vaccine. So the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine. Because of the MMR vaccine, there has this autism. But what they are missing out is that in the first round of the MMR vaccine, it is administered at around 12 months of age. But that is also the time when first symptoms of autism can be observed. So they are missing that point. That's why they have this fallacy post hoc, X and Y. So the next is the role of bias. So the first bias is the confirmation bias, that according to Cherry 2020, it involves information that confirms your previously existing beliefs or biases. So if you have this mindset or perspective, you will only consider information that will satisfy your beliefs. For the anti-vax movements, they will only consider information that will uphold their beliefs about not getting vaccinated. So that is confirmation bias. The other one is the naturalist bias, that whatever is natural cannot be wrong. And since vaccines are man-made, therefore it is unnatural. So they're not believing in the efficacy and safety of the vaccines. But what they don't know is that vaccines have been the savior of many diseases and even our lives. That according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, vaccines save polio, tetanus, influenza, and measles. So it's like, it's okay to have side effects than to have the disease itself. So the next criticism is denialism. So since anti-vaccine movements hold on to a strong beliefs that vaccines are sketchy, they have their own sense of world, and they're denying the truth and what is outside of their world. So as Spectre 2009 defines, it is a denial writ large. When an entire segment of society, often struggling with the trauma of change, they turn away from reality in favor of a more comfortable life. So these anti-vax movements are denying the truth of the vaccine importance because they're just comforting themselves with the lie that it's not important or it's not safe, when in fact it is. So they misinterpret data and would even resist correction. So they are blinded by their own world even though there's a real world outside. So it all boils down to the lack of data. So clearly, they don't have the facts and data. That's why they have these first three fallacies. And all of these boils down to the consequence of prolonging the COVID-19 pandemic. That according to Mandaville 2021 of the New York Times, that it would take 60 to 70% of the population of the United States to be vaccinated before reaching herd immunity. And Dr. Fauci said that it would be possible if vaccines are available. So how can that herd immunity be achieved if there are vaccine skeptic or vaccine hesitant people? So they are significantly or obviously prolong the pandemic. So it would give we are like giving more opportunities for the virus to mutate. So it would give rise to the cases of COVID-19 and even other diseases. So what we can learn from this is that we should have counter messaging actions that will help us to be educated with the right information, and so that we can combat disinformation brought by these movements. And global health community must be responsible for this. And to discuss the next part, here is Neil Ramos.
As discussed, the implications of it to democracy and society as a whole. So we live in a democratic world where freedom of expression is paramount in any social movements. And when it comes to the anti-mask movement, it created a consequence called psychological reactance. Now, this psychological reactance is embedded in this current pandemic, where denial and disregard of the seriousness of the pandemic causes psychological reactance. So the anti-mask movement operates in a conservative ideology. It has maintained its position that COVID-19 is a hoax and it should not be worried to all people, and it is only mainly government that is applying pressure to it. So this is the data or the network analysis that was created by Taylor and Asmundson. We can see here the different connections. These are the sentiments that are being argued by the anti-mask movements. You can see here that they argue false sense of security, difficulty in breathing, and uneasiness of wearing masks. So let us discuss the implications of society in the anti-vax movement. Now, the World Health Organization listed the anti-vax movement as its top 9 things that breach public health. This is because it has gained its ground in spreading health misinformation online. Now, they are associated with populist beliefs that has a distrust between the elites and experts. They operate in a liberal view. So people should have a choice not to get vaccinated. So it is very liberalistic in contrast to the anti-mask movement. So it created a phenomenon called vaccine skepticism. So in this data alone, there are 400 anti-vax social media accounts which contains 58 million followers. That's why the World Health Organization disdains the anti-vax movements, because it created millions of followers online that it breached public health. So social media plays a big factor in spreading misinformation, as evidence in the number of followers and groups in different platforms.